The government's economic front bench at their weekly press conference today continuing to beat the drum on housing and affordability, this morning looking to rural Canada, announcing they're nearing final agreements with 60 small and rural communities under the Housing Accelerator Fund and making good on a commitment to double student loan forgiveness for rural doctors and nurses. But those announcements made early in the day later overshadowed by an ultimatum from NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. Singh making it very clear he is willing to pull out of his governance agreement with the Liberals if their upcoming pharmacare legislation doesn't explicitly pave the way for a universal single-payer system.
What happens if they break the agreement? Then there is no agreement in place. Then we are not entitled, we are not in any way required to continue to provide any support if they break their side of the agreement.
Mr. Singh, you were saying single-payer universal. Mark Holland this weekend on CTV said he's not ideologically wedded to that idea. Does it have to be that March 1st?
Yes.
Gudie Hutchings is the Minister for Rural Economic Development. She's with us live in studio now. Hi, Minister. Good to see you.
Nice to be here with you, Vassy.
I appreciate you making the time. Look, I have a lot of questions on the announcement you made for rural communities, but I have to start off on the deal with the NDP. You sit around the cabinet table. Is it, in your view, at risk of falling apart?
Vassy, again, thanks for the invitation to be here. Look, the negotiations are ongoing. I know Minister Holland, Minister LeBlanc, they're hand in hand with this, so stay tuned.
Do you have any sense of, I guess, the willingness of your government to stay in the deal?
Vassy, I'm here to talk about rural Canadians. They're important and I'm passionate about it. So I'd love to talk about the announcements we made today to help rural Canadians, especially rural Canadians that have access to healthcare issues. And that's important for everybody from coast to coast to coast.
I understand that completely. As I said, I have a number of questions. We're going to spend a long time talking about that. But I think that the question of this agreement is a significant one for Canadians because it also has enabled your government to advance its agenda, including on things that you're here to talk about around rural development. Do you feel if the deal falls apart that your government will not be able to advance its agenda the way it has under the current agreement?
Vassy, as I've said, and I just said, and I'll continue to say, the negotiations are underway. I'm confident in Mr. Holland working with his colleagues at the NDP, and I'm confident in the impact that they're going to have for all Canadians in a good way. So I'm looking forward to the outcome of their negotiations.
So you can't weigh in even on the degree to which you feel as a cabinet minister the agreement is impacting your government's ability to advance its agenda, including on files that you oversee?
I'm passionate about rural Canada. I'm passionate about working for all Canadians, and I'm not going to have any comment and interfere with any negotiations that Minister Holland and Mr. LeBlanc are undertaking.
I'm not asking about those negotiations. I'm just asking about your view as a cabinet minister and the degree to which the agreement with the NDP advances the agenda that you have as a Minister of Rural Economic Development. Do you need the NDP to advance it or no?
Actually, we're working for Canadians from coast to coast to coast. I'm working for rural Canadians from coast to coast to coast. The agreements and what we announced today, they were going to happen anyhow. But we are going to work together, and I know Minister Holland and Mr. LeBlanc are going to continue their negotiations with the NDP.
Okay, let's talk about what you did announce today, the portion of which is aimed at recruiting more doctors and nurses to rural Canada. You said that you'll increase loan forgiveness for those doctors and nurses by 50%. The thing is, I read a press release from April of 2022. You are part of that press release that said the exact same thing. Why did you wait until now to implement it?
So, Vassy, there's one thing to say we're going to implement it. There's one thing to make sure. You just can't say if somebody said to you today there's a job opening at another network somewhere else, you're not going to pack up and go. We need to plant the seed to see what the uptake is for doctors and nurses and nurse practitioners. Our estimate, as Minister Bosno said today, it's going to be well over 1,000 that are interested in working in rural and remote and small communities. Look, if you look at the ratio, if you live in an urban centre, it's probably 1 to 450 people per doctor. If you go to a rural area, it's 1 in 3,000 at least. Plus, you probably have to travel a long distance to get to see that nurse, doctor, or nurse practitioner. We're confident, and from what we've heard on the ground and the roundtables that I've done in rural Canada, that this is going to make a huge difference. It's going to be the tool that doctors and nurses and nurse practitioners need to make that step into committing to work in a rural and remote area.
Yeah, I take your point on the issue with respect to the relative level of coverage for rural areas and the degree to which this could impact it. And it's against that backdrop that I'm asking why it took 2 years. It took 2 years to plant the seed. Is that what you're saying?
Well, if you're in medical school, you know, you've made commitments. Now we're seeing the interest of doctors. I know a young gentleman that's from my hometown, And then he was like, great, when this is in place now, I know I want to come home and I want to go and work on the Northern Peninsula. I've decided where I am, and this is making a huge difference to be the impact for me to go. The other thing that we've done, which is going to make a huge difference, I'm proud of the work that we've done on connectivity. Connectivity in 2014, we had 78% of the country connected. We're now at 93.5%. So we've spent more than 10 previous governments combined on connecting Canada. Why is that important? It's great for kids doing their homework, you working from home, growing your business, for farmers, for fishers, for communities. But it's great for rural healthcare because it now adds another tool to the toolbox of doctors and nurse practitioners and nurses to offer virtual healthcare. We've now, this announcement today, coupled with what we've done in connectivity and what we're going to do, we're well underway to reach our commitments of having 98% connected by 2026 and 100% by 2030. That's going to make a huge difference for rural healthcare in small communities.
And I appreciate those points, Minister. They don't, however, address the substance of my question. When I asked you why it took 2 years for you to, as you described, plant the seed or to implement this program, you described an anecdote of one doctor reaching out to you. Can you quantify what the uptake has been in the past 2 years that led you to make the decision to now introduce it, or why you didn't introduce it earlier? Because if it is going to have as big an impact as your government says it will, wouldn't it have benefited rural Canadians to introduce it sooner?
I think you'd have to reach out to the hospitals and the nurse practitioners and the doctors and the nurses that are going to be impacted and that are going to be interested in this program to avail of the forgiveness of their loans. Not everybody wants to. We know we had to make it a bigger incentive for people to go to rural and small communities. Look, I know the benefits and the joy of living in a small community. I've grown up in one and lived in it all my life. You've heard me say the size of my riding. It's bigger than Switzerland. 200 small towns. My largest town doesn't have 20,000 people. So the realities of living in rural Canada are totally different. And if we don't have doctors and nurses and nurse practitioners moving there, maybe they need an incentive. This is what we've done.
You determined that, though, 2 years ago, that incentive was necessary. You said you'd launch the program in 2023. Again, the point is that you did not. You have yet to say why you waited as long as you did to announce it, and would it not have benefited the Canadians you represent in rural parts of this country to have introduced it earlier? Then those 1,200 more doctors and 4,000 more nurses over 10 years could be over 8 years at this point.
But the doctors and nurses, nurse practitioners have to finish their education and then decide where they're going to go. And the input that we've heard and the...
But they were finishing their education 2 years ago too, were they not?
They were probably had their decision made of where they're going. But I know I've done many, many roundtables across the country on everything from connectivity to housing to healthcare. And what everybody says is this program is going to make a huge difference in giving you a choice to come to a rural and remote and small community. We all know the benefits of those of us that live there. It's a better quality of life, and you're in a community where you know everybody. The communities are welcoming, and frankly, the vistas are much better. So this is going to be an incentive for people to move, and we're confident it's going to have the impact.
And how are you so confident? Can you explain where these numbers come from? Because the estimate, as you've pointed out, and I did as well, is from your government that the increase in loan forgiveness is expected to attract nearly 1,200 more doctors and 4,000 more nurses to rural communities across the country over the next decade. How did you get those numbers?
Minister Bossino and his team did great research into this. We've all done many, many roundtables from coast to coast to coast. This was the number one issue that we heard was an impediment for doctors and nurses and nurse practitioners going to rural Canada. So I'm delighted to be part of a government and that's delivering on that now. And the other good news today was, of course, on housing. Minister Fraser is negotiating 60 contracts for rural and remote communities. So perhaps there's a doctor that's looking to go somewhere and you need a house. So now we've again added another tool in our toolbox. Minister Fraser's done a great job of moving the housing needle. Again, it's not one size fits all, and I'm proud to be part of a government that understands we need many, many items and many, many ways to address the housing issue. This is part of it. And housing and healthcare go hand in hand too.
They do. And just to circle back to my original question, which is how you know those will be the numbers, or how apparently Minister Boissonneau's department knows those will be the numbers. So they've had roundtables, and their estimate based on the interest gauge there is pretty exact. Are you certain that will be the number of doctors that are wooed, I guess is the word?
Personally, Vassy, I think the number is going to be greater because people see the need, people see the benefits of moving to a small community, and I think you're going to see many doctors and nurses and nurse practitioners want to work in a rural and remote community.
Okay, before we go, Minister, I do want to ask you about comments you made late last year with me in another interview that certainly drew a ton of reaction. We haven't spoken since. The comments were around the carbon tax carve-out, and I had posed a question to you about Canadians in Western provinces who wanted to see a similar expansion of that carve-out. And you said perhaps they need to elect more Liberals in the prairies so that we can have that conversation as well. Do you regret saying that?
Vassy, I'm proud to be the Minister of Rural Economic Development, and I'm proud to work for a government that understands things are different from coast to coast to coast. The healthcare initiative we announced today, the housing initiative, what I've said earlier on broadband, that is impacting every Canadian, no matter where you live, from coast to coast to coast. I'm proud of what we do, and I'm going to work hard for all Canadians, no matter where you live. Matter of fact, I'm traveling out west the week after next, looking forward to connecting with many, many Canadians from coast to coast in rural and remote areas and the prairies in the north.
So what did you mean to intimate when you said that they should elect more Liberals if they wanted a similar carve-out?
Vassy, as I said, I'm going to work hard for all Canadians in rural areas from coast to coast to coast. I'm going to continue to, and I'm going to I'm going to continue the work. And as I said, I'm in the prairies in the north the week after next, and I'll be engaging with many Canadians in the prairies in the north end to continue to work for rural Canadians. Life is different in rural Canada. I know that. I'm from rural Canada. And I'm going to work hard for all Canadians, no matter where you live, in rural and small communities.
And look, Minister, I'm certainly not insinuating that you aren't working hard on behalf of rural Canadians, but I did hear from, I can't tell you how many Western Canadians after that interview who felt as though you were saying the affordability issues for Canadians in areas where Liberals represent them are more important to the federal government than in areas where Liberals don't represent them. Can you directly address that comment? Because you haven't directly addressed whether you regret making those comments.
Vassy, what we announced today on healthcare is going to help all Canadians. What we announced in housing is going to help all rural Canadians. What we've done in internet, other programs that we've done in affordability, the investments that we're making in a greener economy, that's all helping Canadians no matter where you live from coast to coast to coast.
So it's just the carbon tax that only carve-outs are for Atlantic Canadians?
No, because the rebate goes to all rural Canadians. The relief of the tax on home heating oil goes to all rural Canadians. So as my mother always says, the devil is in the details, and the details are we are looking after all Canadians no matter where you live on the affordability
Unfortunately,
issue.
not all the details, Minister, though, support that. 25% of Atlantic Canadians use heating oil to heat their homes. Just 6% of the rest of Canada does. The Prime Minister made that announcement with you and your Atlantic colleagues surrounding him. And then you went on to say, if other parts of the country want to see the same expansion and the same carve-out, they should elect more Liberals. How come you don't want to address those comments directly?
But Vassy, I have addressed that the rural rebate goes to all Canadians. I have addressed that the home heating oil tax is relieved. The home heat pump program under Minister Wilkinson, that's available to people that can apply. So we are addressing the heating issue and the home heating issue from coast to coast to coast. Look, we know affordability is an issue. That's why we've come up with dental care. We've come up with a rental program. We've come out with a grocery rebate. We're now helping in healthcare and in home again, and Minister Fraser's done a great job. And of course, the $10 a day childcare is having a huge issue, no matter where you live. We are representing and working hard for all Canadians, no matter where you live.
Do I take from that you don't regret making those comments?
Vassy, I'm going to work hard for Canadians, no matter where you live.
You don't regret making the comments?
I'm going to work hard for Canadians, no matter where you live.
I'll point out that's not an answer, but I will leave it there. Minister, I appreciate you making the time today for the interview. Thank you.
Thank you.